I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go outside.
Okay. Well, we're. Oh, maybe we're. Yeah.
I see
I'm-
the lot. I'm gonna start sharing shit from the MCSC pages.
That won't affect the radio.
Oh shit. There we go.
I'm gonna try and stay out of the way.
Connect because it hit 0. Hello? We good? Or do
I
we
can
know?
hear you.
All right. Well, I meant for the aftermathy things. Hopefully we are. Hopefully we're good. I see.
There's a delay.
See mic volume coming on over there. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the folks listening on Aftermath.fm, iHeartRadio. This is Slow News Day. My name is Steve-Poikonen. I am not in my usual location. We'll get into that a little bit. Maybe. I don't even know. Fantastic to be here. I'm going to go ahead and bring, let's see. Let's get rid of the banner thingy. Oh, that's the wrong ass button anyway. Yeah, no, I'm doing great. Doing great. There we go. Hey, what's happening, y'all? I'm very glad to be here this morning. I'm joined, as always, by my better than your co-host, Glory Jones. What's happening, dude? How's it going?
It's happening. Yeah. I was up last night watching this Nautilus live stream because they were doing an expedition somewhere around the ocean basin around Hawaii. And they were going like all over a bunch of like brittle stars and like there's like coral reefs on deep sea ocean environments. Really cool. But like there was also a bunch of manganese nodules. So when I saw them, I was like, oh no. But I digress. You asked how I was, and I couldn't help but go there.
Yeah, I'm really struggling to hear you, but yeah, we're fixing all of that in the moment. I'm in a brand new spot, right? I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. I barely know where I'm at. We do have a great show lined up. We got a couple incredible guests for a very good reason. They both arrived. So I just at the same time while we were doing the intro thing, so as we're pulling them up on the screen here, let's go ahead and introduce everybody. You guys know, returning to the show, friend of ours, as the host of the fabulous Liberty Lockdown podcast, Clint Russell, making his way back to the program here. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that, Josh. I really don't. It's right there. Like 8 billion tabs. Oh, the cam is on. It shouldn't be. That's silly. I'm sitting next to Sleepy in his house.
Live!
In his house, because this normally doesn't happen. I live on the other side of the state, but I have Elon Musk fucking Skynet, and the satellite is bullshit, and it's been dropping my internet feed about every 45 minutes to where I can't even do like 2 segments in a show. So I fucking had a bunch of weird shit happen. I basically took like the amount of money I had left and drove down here just to be able to do the show today. So I may as well get into the donate links and business segment before we introduce the guests. That QR code in the top corner of the screen is from Matrix Bars. Matrix Bars sponsor the show. They have a delicious mushroom chocolate bar product that you can learn all about by scanning that QR code or hitting them up on Twitter or Instagram at Matrix Genetics, MatrixGenetics. The GoFundMe is up. I will throw a link to the chat in the chats throughout the show. All the usual donate links, PayPal, CashApp, Venmo, all that good stuff. Buy Sleepy Josh coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Bort, BORT. And with that, let's get into it. I did introduce Clint. Very happy to have him back onto the show. For the first time, the man whose memes make you smile, and whose content makes you question the world in which we live, Sal the Agorist, the Agorist. I'm sorry, I always say that wrong. The Agorist is joining us. Sal Mayweather, how are you, my friend?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Oh no, it's chunky.
Whoa.
That was wild audio. I'm not sure.
I need to reconnect.
It's weird for me too.
Yeah, me too.
You may have to drop out and drop back in, Sal. I don't know. I'm not sure. It sounded
better. Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, that's way better.
Okay. We're fucked up. Sorry.
It's all good, man.
Cool.
It's live broadcasting. This shit happens. This is why.
Yeah, no,
This is why we're the
I'm just
actual
saying-
professionals when it comes to this, because we don't have the $1 billion budgets and the production teams and the 55 takes, and
I hear you.
we have to know what we're talking about in real time. We have to deal with all of the glitches that come our way in real time. We have to be together enough to not totally lose it and throw equipment and walk off.
I give the live streamers a lot of credit because I wouldn't want to deal with that. I'm always like editing my shit and stuff like that. So God bless you guys.
I don't have the, I don't know. I don't have the patience to be the editor.
Oh man, it's awful. It's awful.
I do both live and editing, post production.
It's like two full-time jobs. Yeah, it's brutal. I don't know how like Tom Woods puts out an episode every day and like guys like that. It's just I don't see that's possible.
They have a team behind them. They got
True.
actual money funneling in. We're doing this all.
Right.
Yeah. We do it live.
True.
Before
Okay, we'll do it live.
Before they nuked Magnus from Twitter, the day before they nuked Magnus from Twitter, he was on the show with me, and we were like, "Yeah, dude, the independent media world, largely until you've hit the point to where you're actually getting invited on mainstream shows, is basically just poor people donating to poor people, and that's it. That's it.
What
That's how
it is,
you
dude.
have to hope you reach enough poor people so that you can enjoy the cup of noodles at the end of the day. Like it's a wild game, man.
This is why I have such a competitive advantage against everybody. Is that I had a mortgage company that I ran for a decade, and basically saved up a bunch of cash so that I could then pursue my true passion, which is ranting against the government. So I'm very lucky. But you're right. This is a total loss leader. Like I am losing I am hemorrhaging money to do what I'm doing. So anybody that thinks this is a grift is out of their fucking mind.
God bless you. Somebody's got to do it.
Right.
That's what I like. There's people that line up all day on social media to scream at the people who have quite literally put everything they have into the work that they do, like risking not just any sort of reputation, but financial future, family relationships, all kinds of shit. And we're the grifters. But the people who have, the intelligence apparatus, the non-governmental organization mafia behind them, every political party, every corporate entity looking for leverage somewhere, those are the arbiters of truth in the world.
Those are the
and
truth.
They're going to give it to you straight.
No, it's absurd. I mean, I love the bootstrap nature of it, though. I think it really separates the wheat from the chaff. Like if anybody that's still doing this for an extended period of time, given how little resources we all receive in doing so, it really shows the true believers versus the non. And I'm grateful for everybody that's doing it, honestly.
Yeah, and how hard it is to like spread the message too when they've spent so much time like entrapping you at the fringe to the point where like they just expect no one to listen to you. But like, you're still reaching new people. That's
On the other hand, as Agorist, there is a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity available because of the state. So I think there is a lot of opportunities for libertarians to make money. One of the things I like to say is that if you understand economics and you aren't making money, then you're just lazy. Because if you've read Rothbard and you're not using that to your advantage to earn an income, then you probably just don't want it bad enough. Like we understand the basic laws of economics, so invest in cryptocurrency, buy Bitcoin, like get into like all the different opportunities available in the libertarian space. But everything that you guys have said is true, though. It's like it's not we're not going to get rich by podcasting and stuff like that. We only do it because we're dedicated. So
I'm back.
I'm getting used to the new setup here. I've got mute buttons in different spots now and whatnot. So I don't know how much time everyone has today, and I know that we're here for kind of at least initially a little bit different reason, and I kind of wanted to kick off the discussion with that because there has been such a deliberate division, I guess grift would be the right word, going on around a bunch of high profile court cases lately. And we all know what they were. We all know we all know that in most cases, the verdict that was delivered was the verdict that was the most predictable and realistically the most accurate given the circumstances. So the fact that we've got so many different angry conversations and so many divisive conversations going on around issues and court cases that at least in my opinion came to logical and correct conclusions, but the arguments are taking place in all of the ancillary areas around it. With the case of Rittenhouse, these being lionized by some, he's being demonized by others. There's a lot of people that are just of the opinion that that his mom should have had the brakes beaten off of her instead of him ever going to court. You know, that like the fact that nobody's actually talking about this kid's mom took a 17-year-old to a riot, maybe that's irresponsible parenting. Like that's gone out the window. So I was hoping maybe we could get into some of that. And I know there's a little bit of a Twitter spat, but it's fucking, again, like everybody here agrees with each other on about 90 to 95% of the stuff, more, you know, and almost all of the big stuff, if not all of the big stuff. So, because really, again, in my opinion, the only sanity coming out of the world right now is coming from the libertarian and anarchist quadrants and corners of thought. I guess is where I wanted to go with that. Was hoping we could kind of explore some of these ideas and see if we can't get somewhere.
Sure, I would actually like to hear Sal's position on Rittenhouse, because I am a little confused as to the one tweet that I responded to that kind of set all this off. So if you could just
we're gonna pull that up right now just because I'm a punk.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even remember what tweet. There's been so much like Twitter spouts going on that there's like it's hard to keep up with. But my general opinion on Rittenhouse has sort of like been taken out of context like a whole lot by like a lot of like corners of the libertarian community. My opinion is just simply that he was acting in self-defense, but it's never appropriate to prop up a Blue Lives Matter supporter as some sort of anarchist hero. So yeah, it's one thing to say he was a victim and he was acting in self-defense. It's another to turn this guy into some sort of hero. It's just like George Floyd, like I said to the left libertarians when that happened. It's okay. It's a perfectly acceptable opinion to hold that this man was a victim, but he shouldn't be lionized or turned into a hero. And that's really my only take here.
Well, what was it about? I mean, are we really going to hold only people with our exact belief systems up as heroes? I mean, because he was essentially, in my view, he was essentially living out what would probably be necessary in an anarchist society, which is people that look after their community and take care of people in their community despite all sorts of craziness that's going on around them. I don't think he went out there as, acting as a police officer. I mean, he went out there if we didn't have police, this is kind of what you would have to have. So I'm just curious as to like what
I disagree. I don't think that if we in a free society, we wouldn't have 17-year-old vigilantes. I think we would have private insurance firms and private security companies that compete with one another to sort of try to create the best outcome. Like I said, it's perfectly acceptable to say he was acting in self-defense, but he was a dumbass for being there. He never should have been there in the first place. No 17-year-old should be walking through a mob of Antifas with an AR-15. It's just not a good idea. It's not a bright move to make. So that's the first reason that we shouldn't be propping him up. But the second reason is that why should we as libertarians be sort of lionizing this Blue Lives Matter narrative? I just don't see it. It's much better for us to just say, okay, he was acting in self-defense and let that be the end of the conversation. Like, let's not sort of like try to turn this kid into like Rothbard or something like that. Like that's just sort of absurd to me.
Well, I think it's a bit of a straw man to say that we're turning him into Rothbard. I mean,
I'm being hyperbolic, but you know what I mean, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any anarchists out there that are supporting him because he supports the cops. I mean, that I personally what's that?
I agree. I don't think that that's why that anybody's out there supporting him. But to me, it's a much more of a logical response to say, yes, it was self-defense, but no, he's not a hero. I think it's a perfectly acceptable position to hold. I think it's the only logical position that an anarchist can possibly hold.
I think it would be unfair to hold the ideas of someone that ends up in that position to decide on whether or not we find them to be, you know, a morally
I agree. I don't
good
disagree
actor, especially at 17. It's like we have, and I made this point in that same thread, that there are some of the best anti-war activists I know are former soldiers, you know, and the reason that they have seen the light is because they went over and they.
So I agree. I agree with that, Clint. I think that at least for me and for where I live in the sort of like anarchist realm of thought, if this was something like a voluntary citizen militia, then there you would imagine, I think, would be like degrees of training and a process by which you went from learning how to do what you need to do to be, you know, a part of this organization to actually being on the front lines in that organization. And there would be some sort of a you know, training period or process. Whether or not you would be fully through that at 17, that's hypothetical at this point. But my point, I guess, largely would be, if this was merely voluntarist association for community defense, there wouldn't be a history in Rittenhouse to a dedication towards being part of the police, towards becoming a police officer. And he was there. It looks like, I don't know what's in his heart, dude. I can't say.
It's pure speculation.
Yes. Standing from my position on Speculation Island, it looks like the intent was more to be supportive of the state's monopoly on violence, to continue that. And I understand that private property comes into it. I understand that self-defense comes into it. In his situation where he shot those dudes, that was self-defense. The reason that he was there was not necessarily, at least based on past history, previous statements, and desire to become a police officer, for the purpose of voluntary citizen self-defense. It was more for
why do you guys think that, though? I mean, he had an agreement with the owners of the building that he was defending when the first attack happened. So that does seem to me to be exactly what you're describing, which is a voluntary agreement amongst people to defend their own property.
I think it's sort of absurd to say that some 17-year-old entered into like a private security contract with a multi-million-dollar car dealership. That's absurd. That's not going to happen. It's also equally absurd to say that he traveled 20 miles with his AR-15 to clean dumpsters, to clean graffiti off dumpsters. It's much more likely. Again, it's pure speculation. But it's all we can do is speculate, and really, it's all bullshit is what we're talking about right now, because none of us actually know. But it seems
that's
more
not
likely.
True. The owner of that business testified that he had agreed to have him defend his business.
Fair enough. I didn't watch the trial. I didn't buy into any of that stuff. It seems more likely to me, though, that he was there to support the Blue Lives Matter narrative, because he was like this EMT kid. Like, we all know the type who like sticks like the flashing lights in their grill and they get off on it and like they think it's all cool and shit. And he was like the first responder kind of kid. Like, it seems much more likely to me that he was there to support his fellow first responders and Blue Lives Matter, like people like that, than he was to like clean graffiti up dumpsters or to defend like a multi-million-dollar car dealership. I don't know the facts. I could be wrong. I'm just speculating. I didn't watch the trial, but that's just what it seems like to me.
Also, to chime in as well regarding the role of the police, there's also the role of cops or feds or undercovers in instigating the riots to begin with, because it's like there's a whole narrative going around about how, oh, well, if police were doing their job and this wouldn't happen to begin with, Kyle wouldn't feel the need to go there. No, police were doing exactly what they were there to do, in being I don't doubt that there was some opportunism that was, inflaming the tensions that led to the riots. But at the same time, like, we do live in an environment where there are a lot of paid instigators and undercovers and feds, which lead these riots to kick off into a situation that makes some propagandized little bootlicker feel the need to go there and defend a multi-million-dollar business.
That's exactly what happened with George Floyd too. Remember, it was the cops who were knocking out the windows at the AutoZone, and they chased them back to the police department. So it's like these statist infiltrators are turning legitimate anti-police protests after they've murdered civilians, shot them in the back in Jacob+Blake's case, and then they're turning these protests into riots in order to sort of propel and defend this Blue Lives Matter narrative. And as an agorist, like, it'll be a cold, cold day in hell before I support the police or their narrative in any way whatsoever on my platform. That being said, it's perfectly acceptable to say, like, this kid, like, you know, if you try to grab somebody's gun, then shoot them. Fine, that's self-defense. I agree with that. But I'm not going to support the police or their narrative ever.
Well, if we're going to talk about narratives, we should get it right. Jacob+Blake was not murdered. He was shot in the back. I'll grant you that. But
if you get shot in the back, how could it possibly? The only way you could possibly be self-defense if you shoot somebody in the back is if they're running away from you and shooting like this.
No,
I don't
brother,
know the details of the case.
He's not dead. He's not dead. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's still like, regardless of whether he's dead or not, it's still an unjust initiation of aggression.
Well, he did have a knife, but I completely agree with you that it was unjust. Absolutely. Anyways, the point that I'm trying to make about Rittenhouse is that, you know, if we were to not have police in this situation, I think that Rittenhouse is behaving in a way that many anarchists at 17 or 18 or 19, I mean, this is when usually you see young men rise up to defend their neighborhood, their country, if you want to put it in a nationalistic standpoint, is that age group. I mean, that is normally the people that do it. And if you don't have...
Can we determine why? Because when you take someone full of testosterone and cum and you strip them of their identity and you give them weapons of war and tell them that they and they alone are the line of defense between the terrorist threat, whatever it may look like, and the sanctity and security of all those women they want to go fuck, and they actually can't get to go fuck them until they go and kill the bad guys, because you don't get pussy until you go on leave. Like,
I think that is certainly true in the modern era, but let's be honest, there has been 16 to 20-year-old men that have been going and fighting in wars for all of human history. I mean, this is
only people that are stupid enough to engage in something that expensive and brutal. I mean, but I'm 43. I understand that violence is expensive. I understand that violence is no fun. And I would probably feel differently if I was a trained cage fighter, but I'm not. I'm someone who has experienced a lot of violence in my life, of someone who has experienced a significant amount of like street level trauma and shit. And fucking, I am at a point now to where, you know, when I first got my head split open by the police at the WTO protests in 1999, that was supposed to make me no longer an activist. That was supposed to make me see that there was nothing worth fighting this machine for. It went the opposite way with me, but what it did teach me was how to be more strategic in the way that I approach the activism.
Well, I would just say, like to have, like, the only way to have strategic activism, in my opinion, is through Agorism and counter economics. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, like, to go, like, just to zoom out from the conversation for a second, take a look at the larger picture here. This is all, in my opinion, just a major distraction from a lot of the other shit that's going on. The same thing with all this like Omicron narrative bullshit. It's just a distraction. It's like when the magician does something with this hand when he's like, you know, using this hand to like pick your pocket or something. It's the same sort of trick here. And that's what's going on with Rittenhouse. They just don't want you to pay attention to the inflation, the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and all these other terrible things that are going on. But when it comes to like activism,
do you not think that the case was important for self-defense rights in this country? I mean, I know you and I both agree that the Constitution is, you know, as worthless as the paper it's written on, but still, if there are enough people in this country that believe in that system and it gets enforced properly, that you don't get someone who's defending themselves put in prison for the rest of their life, that seems like a victory in the interim. No?
I mean, I'm not going to say whether or not the case was like like it set like some sort of important precedent or something like that. I'm not entirely convinced that it did or it didn't either way. I really think it was just a major distraction. I'm not really sure. Really, the most controversial take I had about Rittenhouse wasn't this. It was from last year when I said that the video evidence alone didn't exonerate him. It wasn't sufficient to exonerate him or acquit him. It was only through the witness testimony that we knew that these other people had guns. Right, that's the only time that it actually became revealed that it was actually self-defense. Up until that point, I wasn't convinced based on the video evidence alone. But
oh, that's right. You said that it had to be kind of like equal force. Wasn't that the argument?
Proportional. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Do you stand by that? That if someone's attacking you with a skateboard, that it's not okay to shoot?
Well, I would say that violence that's not proportional is aggression, and I think that's inappropriate. So, like, I don't know. I grew up in North Jersey and like the suburbs. It wasn't like the worst area. It wasn't the best area, and like we would get into fights every single day, worse fights than Rittenhouse got into on tape, and no one ever died. I don't think that the skateboard attack I don't think that any reasonable person would say that death would be a likely outcome from being hit in the back of your shoulder with the flat part of a skateboard. So I wasn't convinced that was self-defense. Then when the witness eventually said that this guy also had a gun, then okay, fine, I'll accept that it's self-defense. And the same thing with Rosenbaum.
I've actually witnessed somebody getting beat. I honestly don't know.
It's contextual. It's contextual.
He was dead, but I've seen people get beat with skateboards before. Like, severely.
I'm not saying
it can take a life. I mean, you have to.
Well, I know I know who to watch when it starts to get really tense, and the one kid pulls the truck key out of his pocket and starts taking the wheels off of his deck.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah,
because when that truck comes swinging into you at just the right angle, you're done. Lights out.
I agree.
And everybody scatters, and then it gets really quiet on that block for about 3 days.
I agree, and I would say that it's definitely contextual. Like it is possible that somebody is beating you to death with a skateboard, and then you have the right to self-defense.
It's all about angle, because if you're swinging it to where the plane of the deck is still flat and it's not the broad back of the deck, that's not going to fuck you up unless you're going wheels and trucks first. If you're swinging it straight across, dude, you've damn.
I agree. But that's how Rittenhouse got hit. Rittenhouse got hit with the flat part of the board, not the trucks, and he got hit on the back part of the shoulder. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if he wanted to kill him, he would have used the trucks, but he didn't want to kill him. So that's why he used the flat part of the board and didn't hit him on the head, right? Otherwise, that's how we know that it wasn't an intent to kill, right? So that's the way I see it. That's the way I saw it.
According to Rittenhouse, he was hit in the back of the head and neck
but
area.
There's photos. There's photos, though, and we can see it. When you look on the photos, that's not the case. He's being hit here. But I don't know. Maybe he got hit more than once, and I didn't see it. Maybe there's video evidence that I didn't see. I don't know. I'm just going by what I saw.
He did get hit twice, but the one on the ground, if you're hit in the back, I don't think there's any way that you can know if you're Kyle Rittenhouse. Oh, this guy didn't mean to hit me with the truck, so I know that this is just going to be a licking and all, and I can walk away from this.
That's fair.
He's being pursued by a lot of people simultaneously. I don't think you have a choice in that moment. I mean, given the extremity of the situation, especially with people running after him, screaming, "Brain him and kill him," and all sorts of craziness, like. I would fear for my life. I don't think anyone could say that they probably wouldn't fear for their life, especially after he just took a life because he thought he was going to be killed. So it's like, I don't know. I think that that's an unusual argument, given that, I don't know how you can possibly have proportional violence in response in that moment when you have a mob of people that are attacking you. Honestly, if you had a gun in that situation, you wouldn't have fired?
Well, I mean, if the other person had a gun, then of course I definitely would have. If they tried to grab my gun, then I would have. But I'm not going to shoot somebody if they punch me. I'm going to punch them back. I'm not going to.
But I mean, if you are armed, you can't be in a fist fight. You know that. I mean, if you're armed, you just can't do that.
No, I disagree. I carry a gun every day, and I would never. The only time I would ever draw my gun is if I ever felt like I had to, and I wouldn't feel like I had to if some soy boy threw a skateboard at me. It's
5 soy boys. I mean, this is and about 100 people behind them. It's pretty extreme. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. I can only go by what I saw on video, and I saw like one little kid like with like little skimpy arms come up and like swing the flat part of his skateboard at some kid. I'm like, yeah, I've taken worse shots than that in middle school, and nobody ever died. I'm not gonna. I would never draw my gun on some
you
kid
kind
for that.
of look like you could take a punch, and you kind of look like you might have been a bastard in middle school. So I mean, I'm not.
I was. Fair
saying.
enough.
Yeah, Rittenhouse is kind of soft in his own respect too.
It's like I said, it's a lot of this is contextual, and like we weren't there, so it's like it's difficult to speculate on motivations and like what happened that we didn't see and that was off video. That's why like I really relied heavily on the witness testimony who said that he had a gun, and that's when I was like, all right, if they had guns, and they were all clean shots.
I got lucky. We got lucky. The friend of ours and a guy who's been on the show a number of times lives in Wisconsin, has a radio and TV show nearby called The Rundown Live, Chris Don T. Harris, and he was in the parking lot filming because again he lives like right down the road. And so when the Jacob+Blake shooting happened, he grabbed his camera and his equipment and ran up, and by sheer dint of circumstances happened to be in the parking lot when all of it was going down. We didn't really pay attention to this thing at all because, technocratic panopticon, complete and total fucking takeover of the entire planet over a highly survivable virus. So we were a little focused on that. But like leading up to the trial or right before Chris Don went to go testify, he got a hold of me and he was like, hey, they called me in. Let's do a show. So then I started paying attention to it, but I had also been sent like all of the video and all of the video that Matt Orfala had collected that he put together for his documentary. I sat there and I watched too, like a fucking schmuck, because I really do think this was a distraction. But like a schmuck, I sat there and I watched it. I had feelings about it. I did, like genuine fucking feelings about it. And I don't even know if I should. Like, I really don't. Because again, technocratic panopticon don't take over.
Well, that's why this case,
a highly survivable virus.
Yeah, that's why this case made such a good distraction, though, because I feel like a lot of the feelings that were coming from this whole situation are coming from a valid place. Like, as much as I disagree with people who go all the way saying, "Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist Nazi," as much as I disagree with that, I think at least the emotions are coming from a very valid place of wanting to expose like how hypocritical our justice system is and yada, yada, yada. But the matter of fact is like conversations like the one we're having right now and conversations about like that maybe people on the left wanted to have of like a genuine education of how terrible our justice system really is, or like a genuine or like a genuine conversation about the role cops play in instigating riots. Like none of that happened.
Thank you.
I feel like the Rittenhouse trial, even though it does have, a few important elements, it became so sensationalized to the point where you had to kind of step back and say, okay, everyone, let's cool down and talk about more important shit. Because right now, high society is bracing itself for the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, and we can't even get a full mugshot of her. Meanwhile, the Rittenhouse trial has like 24/7 live stream 4K HD 180p like coverage or some shit. Like, let's focus a bit.
Like literally, like that was sort of like, I guess that was probably the best description of what got me angry. That I think you just put it into words better than I ever could have. It's like the conversation should have been about Jacob+Blake and the police, not about like the Blue Lives Matter people are heroes. Like that was the opposite of what we were supposed to be discussing here. And that's sort of really, I guess, really what sort of touched me off here. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
I mean, I agree with all three of you that the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is a far more important thing in terms of what happened criminally. I mean, it's egregious, and it needs to be there needs to be as much light shed on it as possible. And I'm trying my best, even though they've now rejected call-ins and all sorts of coverage. It's going to be virtually impossible, which is
it got weird quick.
What's that?
It got weird quick. It went from courthouse is open to the public. It's a public gallery. It's a federal trial. We have to let the people in to, all of the things that they're going to talk about really going to piss people off. So we can't let anybody into this thing. Everybody's got to go. And by the way, there's absolutely nothing going on here that you need to know about. It's it's very concerning. At first, they said that there was going to be a phone number that independent journalists could call into to listen to the trial. I intended to do so. I was going to listen to the entire thing. That's gone. So I'm extremely frustrated. But I actually disagree with you guys that this was a complete distraction. Had Rittenhouse been put in prison for the rest of his life, I think that the Second Amendment and self-defense would have been basically abolished. And whether or not that, I agree with you guys also that there needs to be a bigger discussion when it comes to criminal justice reform and how the system is unequal. However, when you start off the discussion with labeling someone a white supremacist, you put people on the defensive that requires them to defend their character, and you're not wrong. It becomes a distraction. We can't have a conversation because we're caught up in all the name calling.
I don't think you're wrong, but I think that the distraction is the identity politics. They want to draw you into that white versus black, blue lives matter versus black lives matter. That sort of division, and it's all artificial, and it's all created on purpose. Like we were saying, just to distract us from the real narrative.
I would argue that you're playing into the Blue Lives Matter narrative by refusing to give him any credit for his behavior on that day by saying that he's a bootlicker, he's a statist, he's this and that. It's what does his belief system matter if he behaved in an honorable fashion on that day? I mean, that's really my stance on it.
Well, again, I don't think you're wrong. It's fine to say that he was acting in self-defense. It's just another thing to sort of prop him up as some sort of godhead of libertarianism because he killed a bunch of commies or something like that.
That's a little hyperbolic. I don't think anyone's saying he's a godhead of libertarianism. I'm just saying that in a stateless society, we would have people that are defending private property on their own terms, and he did so by mutual agreement. It was basically
that I disagree with. I don't think that that's how we would do it. I mean, it's only speculation. We don't know how entrepreneurs would apply creativity to the marketplace, but I don't think there would be 17-year-old vigilantes. I think it'd be much more likely to have private insurance companies and stuff like that. 30
years down the road, sure, I think that's a possibility. There is going to be an interim period when you have, when you're abolishing the state and going to a stateless society where it's going to be incumbent upon people to protect their own property. I think we can agree. It's not going to be a light switch where you just cops are gone.
Phase 4 of the Agora is when the private defense agencies overtake the public defense agencies, and it'll sort of phase out. At least that's the way we see it in Agora.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying we're nowhere near that. So we're not near stage 4.
True. True.
So
I'm not sure. I just don't think we can say that it's sort of it's a good example of how libertarians would deal with a mob, is to send 17-year-olds with their AR-15 into the center of the mob to go try to calm everyone down. I don't think that's how it would be handled in a free society. It can be, I guess. I mean, I don't know, but that's not the ideal way to handle it, I don't think.
Last resort.
We all agree it's not ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, very last resort.
I think that, I mean, if we're gonna go away from the nuts and bolts of the thing and kind of get out into broader conceptual aspects of this, I do 100% agree with Sal that counter economics is the way to go about this. I have a number of different thoughts that I've tried to propose to my friends on the left over the last month or so, because they all got together and they had a general strike summit thing. Glory here was on one of the panels. Oh my God, dude, it was hysterical. They put Glory on a panel with that dude
Shahid Buttar
that ran against Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. He looks like if Jafar from Aladdin fucked the parrot from Aladdin.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
kind of sounds like he's just San Francisco. He's a laptop DJ and he thinks he's a politician. At any rate, like, but what I was trying to get across to them, and I would love to get you guys' take on this, is because it looks like we're going into a period this winter where there's going to be a strain on first responders. There's going to be a strain on the monopoly that the state maintains on violence, the ability to dispatch the physical embodiments of that monopoly on violence is going to be under a lot of pressure. So the people that have been on strike and doing it successfully, like people at John Deere, or the people that have legitimate grievances with their workplaces, be it for mandates or what the fuck ever, if instead of trying to get everybody to think and look and dress and act like you ideologically before you're allowed to go on general strike, how about we take a couple of different employment sectors, Uber and Lyft drivers and utility workers and firefighters. Okay, you're all on strike this week or this month. And while we're doing that, the restaurant owners and the shop owners get together and decide we're going to exchange currency this way now. So all of these people that are on strike, we're going to support them and we're going to feed them and we're going to operate our economies as we normally would. We're just not going to use fiat currency while these strikes are taking place. And then other organizers go to other organizers and say, hey, let's do this too, as you slowly pull away from all of the sectors that drive central banking, that drive these centralized power structures and drive the state's monopoly on violence. Throw it out.
I mean, I love it. I love the idea that the issue, I think, is the same issue I've ran into when it comes to getting people to refuse to comply generally, is that you need it to be a unified movement. And I don't think we have that yet for whatever reason. Like there are too many people that are still indoctrinated, and there are too many people that fear losing their income stream to take that stand.
Well, this is what I'm saying. You target people based on their specific self-interest, based on their particular location. I'm not trying to necessarily get everybody to hold hands and agree overall on the. In fact, I'm of the opinion that being able to decide what happens next as a society is the reward we get for breaking the grip that centralized power has on.
Sure.
Like,
I think Sal, you tell me, Sal. You're the Agorist here.
So I think the only solution really to a lot of these like workers' problems is Agorism, and that's why I think Agorism is sort of known as like a left libertarian philosophy, because we are sensitive to the plight of the working class. We're the only faction of the liberty community that is, in fact, the way we solve these things, like forced injections by corporations and subsidies and stuff like that, and maltreatment of workers, is through entrepreneurship. It's through encouraging black and gray market entrepreneurship. That's the only way. Honestly, I think the best thing someone can do for themselves in their own life to bring about a state of liberty is to become your own boss. I do think obviously becoming your own bank is a major part of that, but I think entrepreneurship is probably equal to becoming your own bank. It's like absolutely key in liberating yourself. And if you do that through like in a disruptive way by engaging the black and gray markets, if we all do that, it turns out we can actually effectuate a free society, right? It's sort of, it sounds utopian to say that we can bring about a Rothbardian society, but if we all engage in counter economics, then we actually can. It actually becomes like not utopia, it becomes realistic. But I think that's the only way that it happens. And it's, back to your point about like risk and how like a lot of people don't want to, risk the family farm to, engage the black market or something like that. There's only two forms of libertarianism that practice noncompliance and disobedience, right? There's the sovereign citizens and there's the agorists. The sovereign citizens, if you go on YouTube, there's a plethora of videos of them being shot on the side of the street by cops because they don't want to show their license or registration or whatever. They are like open in your front, in your face, like defiant. And like, I think that's wonderful. God bless those people. I think they're all heroes in my opinion. But I don't have balls that big. As an agorist, I think it's a much better way to go about it is to sort of like be the gray man and blend into the shadows and like operate like in the background, and that's where operational security comes into play. And like that's where we like start using things like cryptocurrencies and encrypted communications and secure computing and so on and so forth, and a lot of the tools created by crypto anarchists. So we can sort of minimize the risk by all these tools that have been created and are being created continuously. We're working on a project now to create like an Agorist DAO, so that it's probably too early even talking about it, but the idea is to hopefully we can like create this sort of slush fund for Agorists, where if you get in trouble for some sort of victimless crime, boom, we can cover your legal defense, we can help you with bail, and this way we can sort of lower the barriers, lower the risk to engaging in counter-economic activity. So it's sort of a long-winded way to respond, but
I love all those ideas, but I would be remiss not to push back, and I hate to be contentious. I hate to be contentious, but I don't understand the two assertions you made. One being that only sovereign citizens and agorists are pushing to not comply, given that Tom Woods, Dave Smith, I mean Malice, myself, like none of us are those camps, and we're all pushing to not comply. And then also you said that
Dave said he would take the cab to go to the debate between Horton and Bill Kristol if his kid wasn't being.
I would just say that when they do advocate for those non-compliant, civilly disobedient solutions, they're behaving more as an agorist than they are as a member of the Mises Caucus or the GOP or whatever other faction of the community they might be in. It's like we are all counter-economists to some degree, right? Nobody follows the law 100%. It's just, where do we fall on that spectrum of counter-economic activity?
Fair
And,
enough.
on the other side would be compliance.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then, I mean, I'm in agreement. I think that I'm still going to call it agorism, even though I know I'm mispronouncing it.
That's fine. Potato.
I think that it's a really important tool in the tool belt, and I'm a huge proponent of it. I mean, even though I don't consider myself one, dictionary definitionally, I still think that I'm very much interested in looking after the working class. I think that the biggest problem with libertarianism is that they have essentially failed to address the problems of the working class to a large extent. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for us to demonstrate that our ideas have value to real people in their real lives, in the real moment. And I hope
we're your guys.
Movement. Yeah,
we're your guys. We're the faction of the community you've been looking for. Then check out. I'm sure you're probably familiar, but for the listeners who aren't, real quick, Wally Conger's book, Agorist Class Theory, is a great book if anybody is interested in reading more about that.
I am curious about one thing with the I've heard both. I've heard all kinds of pronunciations. The Agorist or Agorist position on the use of essentially the blockchain for like surveillance purposes, like not just transparency, but also essentially how we see a lot of kind of global shapers looking to put like our health data on the blockchain. And there's a deal with Cardano where they're trying to put Ethiopian school children on the blockchain. I'm curious as to what you guys think of those developments on the
by the way,
sphere.
Derek Bros, fucking 8 months ago when I told you Cardano was shady and I sent you that paper, that's why.
What?
Love you, Derek. By the way, I love you. Derek's a friend. I'm
Is Derek even watching this?
Huh?
Is Derek even watching this?
Derek watches, yeah.
Derek.
So I think I think that any new technology is going to be used against us, but we're also going to use it against the government. And I think that's the same is true with like blockchains and cryptocurrencies. They're going to use it against us, but we're going to use it against them. Ultimately, we win because the market always wins. You mentioned something interesting though, which is like putting healthcare data on chain. I think this is something that's really we're not talking about, and this is something that's going to be up and coming in terms of agorism. John McAfee was a big proponent of medical tokens. He used to talk about it all the time. And he would say how privacy coins and medical tokens is the solution to sort of socialized healthcare. I think he was right. Check out this coin called like Doke Token. I think it's like MCT. And essentially the way it works is you grant them access to your healthcare data. And in return for that, you receive Doke tokens, which can then be exchanged for real life healthcare services like telecommunications appointments with like doctors all over the world. So like we are using this technology to sort of combat the sort of centralized socialist system. But with that being said, they are going to use like things like central bank digital currencies and all these terrible things. They're going to try to use that against us.
I mean, I have to ask, it seems as if if they're going to be funding that operation to get you telemedical system or services, they're selling your medical data, correct?
Yeah, yes, they are. They're selling it to like researchers and stuff like that. And I think colleges and universities and things like that. But right now, your healthcare data is being sold anyway. It's just that you're not the one profiting off of your data, right? Mark Zuckerberg is profiting off of your data. Jack is making money off of your data, not you. So Agorist are trying to turn that around and sort of make that a source of income for us.
Hang on,
I love that.
Okay? So is the whole concept rooted in like the cypherpunk ethos that there's no privacy, just operational security, and therefore you have to accept that there's no privacy? If you accept that and you try to make yourself as operationally secure as possible, and it doesn't fucking matter who gets your information downstream because you're in charge of what goes out, is that where this is like based in?
Essentially, yeah. As long as you're in control of your data, then it's up to you what happens to it, right? So, like, if you don't want your healthcare data being distributed, then you should have that right to prevent it. But if you do want to have it distributed and you want to make money from it, then you should have that ability as well. And that's what I think they're doing. I don't work for Dope Token. I'm not a spokesperson, not an ambassador. I just know a little bit about it because McAfee told me about it years ago, and I've been like following them. They just actually opened up services to like most of the United States. I think it was like just Latin America plus Florida, and now it's like they're expanding access. So it's definitely a one alternative to like Obamacare that I think is obviously preferable. It's sort of empowering the individual rather than the corporation, and that's what Agorism is all about: decentralization.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea in the sense that it's voluntary. I mean, I wouldn't opt in. I'd rather pay for my own care so that I don't have to have my medical health information on blockchain so that anyone can, utilize it for whatever purpose downstream. But I think that as long as it's voluntary and you get to opt in or not, that's totally.
And by the way, content tokenization was really what we're talking about here. It's not like or the tokenization of content and data. It's not just in terms of healthcare. So in terms of all sorts of things, we're sort of getting off topic, but like think about like what minds.com does, right? It's like now you are profiting off of your posts, right? Not Mark Zuckerberg, not these major tech monopolies. So I think tokenization is sort of like this, we're really in the infantile stages of the sort of what I call the Tocambrian explosion. The people who understand this, I think, are going to be wealthy pretty soon. But yeah, that was just, like I said, I think we're getting a little off topic, but yeah.
No, I mean, I agree that's
what we do at this show.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think that is the future of social media, is that we're eventually going to end up in a better ecosystem where the content creators are actually compensated for their work, and it's bizarre to me that it's taken so long, given how fast technology improves. But I think it boils down to a competition between like crony capitalist organizations like Amazon and Facebook and Google, YouTube, all these people, and versus the independent people. And it's tough to compete because you're dealing with, basically businesses that have unlimited resources because of their connections to the government. It's a real chicken and the egg scenario where I don't know what we have to abolish first, the social media guys or the government that's making them the behemoths they are.
There's no difference between the social media guys and the government. The social media guys are the government. There's no chicken or egg there. It's the entire.
They're all part of the same larger reptilian family.
So it's essentially a race to sort of federate between decentralized organizations and get a sort of cohesive. Because I agree, I don't think that there is any more damaging violence that can be waged upon the predator class or the elites or whatever the fuck you want to call them than economic violence. And the way to do that is through counter economics. That's a firm belief that I have. It's just a getting to that federation where we all agree on how to do it, knowing that it's, people with very, very different belief systems and structures and all that kind of shit going into it. But I do think that, again, I think the reward is deciding what we get to do after we break the centralized power structures, because not everybody's going to want to go into the brave new future of the metaverse. You know, they're definitely
God
going
willing.
to want to pull back and be like, no, I'd rather trade my doctor, you know, labor, livestock, meat, fucking gold, what the fuck ever, you know, then get on the dope coin train. Although that sounds wild as fuck, man. I'm halfway there.
Dope coin. I'm buying. What exchange are you on?
Moonshot with dope coin.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know. And by the way, yeah, Sal, there's this show. This is a conversation. I've never tried to do like an interview kind of show where it's like, here's a set list of things we're going to talk about. I have a list of questions I've prepared. No, man. So much more beneficial information comes out this way. Like actually understanding where somebody's coming from, you know, comes out this way.
Let me make this.
So that helps too.
Let me make this contentious once more. I think that the reason I have kind of made it my mission to have the libertarians come to Rittenhouse's defense is simply because I think that ultimately, contrary to, you know, or setting aside his political beliefs prior to that night, if you've seen any of his interviews post that trial, he seems to have had a come to Jesus moment when it comes to trusting the police and things of that nature, and trusting prosecution. He said that at one point he used to idolize prosecutors, and now he can't even believe that he was ever that person. I think that this is an opportunity for libertarians to basically swing some of the Blue Lives Matter supporters in our direction. And I think that it's a mistake to just go, oh, well, he took pictures in, you know, police outfits, or he loved the cops prior to that evening. And you know, demonize him for past beliefs. It's like I'm rare in that I've been a libertarian since birth because of my upbringing with my father, but for the most part, none of us started out here. So like, I like to keep a door at least ajar for people to walk through. And when we just go, oh, this bootlicker, you know, who cares?
I'd say we lost a greater opportunity by. Sorry, my Siri's going off. I'd say that we lost a greater opportunity by losing the conversation about Jacob+Blake to Kyle Rittenhouse. We lost more potential libertarians by losing that opportunity than we did by drawing them in through saying, "Oh, these prosecutors and these cops are malicious." Right? We had a greater chance to sort of recruit more people by discussing the Jacob+Blake case than we do by discussing prosecutorial misconduct for Kyle Rittenhouse.
I would agree with you if I thought that there was more people on the left that were, you know, having their come to Jesus moment than on the right. But I think over the past
That's fair.
2 years, it's been the opposite, in my opinion. I grant you that, like the Jacob+Blake shooting and any of the, you know, police malfeasance that we've witnessed, thanks to social media and the rapid exchange of information that we now have, has been invaluable to libertarians. And I agree with you that we have not capitalized on it adequately. But ultimately, the media set the narrative on Rittenhouse. We didn't do that. I mean, that's not our doing, and we can't really control that, but we can control what the libertarian sphere is talking about. And I grant you, like, yes, we should have paid further attention to the police brutality that those protests were stemming from.
Right. But I think that media narrative wasn't an accident. It was intentional, like it was intentionally divisive. It was trying to create this sort of divide in society. And like I said earlier, I think it was, maybe I'm conspiratorial. Maybe I'm just growing conspiratorial as I've gotten older, but I really think it was just sort of intentionally divisive to distract us from things like inflation, supply chain shortages, Ghislaine Maxwell, and all of the real shit that's going on. Like,
I agree that it was divisive intentionally. I just disagree that it wasn't important. I mean, or that it was a flat out distraction, because had he spent the rest of his life in prison, I don't think anyone in their right mind would have been, you know, utilizing Second Amendment.
I agree with that. I don't think he should have.
Can we pull back a little bit though and remember when Kenosha happened? Because the rest of the Midwest was already burning. The rest of the Midwest was already going the fuck off. And
Not
It
just
was
the Midwest,
written-
California, all over the place. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I mean, in terms of like media narrative and the way that you would want to kind of shift the focus from what was really starting to look like just a bunch of out of hand, either instigators, paid professional agitators, fucking cops, and then whatever group you personally don't like. They were all out of hand, and there was nothing that was really galvanizing people at that moment, because everybody was being such a dick. And then all of a sudden, a white kid who looks like he might have ties to some sort of white nationalist organization, so saith the media, that's not reality, but so saith the media, and now there's something that is even more clearly divisive and less muddy than what had already been going down with the Black Lives Matter protests. All the information about George Floyd and what his life was like was starting to come out. Information about Derek Chauvin and their partnership and the relationship that he had with George Floyd was starting to come out. So in terms of a necessary distraction, you could not have asked for a better one. I'm not saying that it was provocated. I'm not. There's no tinfoil hattery here. I'm just Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste.
I actually agree with everything you just said. I just think that the mistake is in allowing the division to get into our own communities. When I don't like when I see right-leaning libertarians talk about George Floyd's history. When they talk about how he was a bad guy and he had bad beliefs. It's like, I don't care. If he was killed by the cops, those cops deserve to go to prison forever. Doesn't matter.
That's really my only point here. My main point in all of this is just that it's an okay position to say that these people, Kyle Rittenhouse, George Floyd, they're victims, but they're not worthy of being propped up as like anarchist heroes. Like they're not. You know what I mean? Like
Assange is in Belmarsh prison right now.
Right. That's a hero.
Journalist and publisher who has given more information about what the U.S. empire and fucking corporate malfeasance is up to for the last decade, and the LP
20 years
has not made him a hero. The LP has not put Julian Assange up on front and center every time. The only time you hear anybody out of the LP talk about Julian Assange is when Scott Horton gets a fucking, particularly great article from like my friends or Kate Johnstone, or Ray McGovern will do a piece, and so I know that they're completely different issues. I know that they are. I know that 2A defense.
No, they aren't completely different, because you're talking about what should be the focus point of what we're talking about, and like that's 1A. That's freedom of speech. Like that's just as important in my opinion as 2A. Or I mean, it's very close. Anyways, I agree with you. Like we get distracted and we don't focus on the things that matter because we're all humans and we are all victim to the same media push that happens, and it becomes the conversation of the day, and we all are opinionated because we're all talking 24/7. But I agree with you. Like the LP has failed miserably in not capitalizing, but really working to get Assange freed, because it's as big a threat as anything that's happened over the past 20 years.
But like as content creators and like influencers or whatever, it's sort of like our job to sort of like put the rails on the road here and like make sure the conversation stays in a straight line. So like let's keep the conversation about real heroes like Assange and Ulbricht and Nakamoto and Cody Wilson and Erwin Schiff and Lavoy Finicum. Let's talk about those people. Let's not lionize people who are less than that. Like, to go back to Assange, not to like unnecessarily provoke the right libertarians because they're already mad at me enough, but like, when's the last, other than Scott Horton, what right libertarian do you know that's ever like done anything to lionize Julian Assange? I can't think of one off the top of my head. Scott Horton's probably the only one I can think of. But they had no problem lionizing this Rittenhouse kid.
I think everyone speaks positively of Assange, but I agree with you that they do not. I think it's likely because the case is it's persisted for forever, it feels like, and I think that it
Agreed.
Just people get caught up in the newest atrocity
again, but But like as
But I
as
agree
like
with you. Like, yeah, we haven't talked about it enough. Absolutely. Across the board, we have not talked about it enough. I don't talk about it enough, and I do a show twice a week.
same.
It's just that these stories
I
kind of
keep reminding all of my libertarian friends with podcasts that I've been the national organizer for a group called Action for Assange for more
I
than
know.
2 years, that I've covered like quite literally. It drove me insane. It burnt out my adrenals. Like my adrenal glands were gone for months from fucking waking up with Sleepy at 1 o'clock in the morning to do live court coverage because the court started at 9 a.m. in London. And then I would go to work as a carpenter for 7 or 8 hours and then come back and do another 2, yeah. Like that shit. I mean, there are better people than me, or there are at least more palatable people than me to explain this. Like Kevin Gostola is 100% perfect to go and talk about every detail of this. I can explain why it matters to a libertarian audience a little bit better than Kevin, but and I'm not sure what just happened with the cameras here, but it could be people had to jump up. I don't even know. But yeah, I mean, there's and just quickly, I mean, there is Scott does tremendous work. Scott is, and everybody at antiwar.com does awesome work, but it shouldn't take Magnus, who is so frequently kicked off Twitter, to go and like rattle the cages of prominent LP figures to get them to mention Julian Assange on like a day where he's in court, or even a day where he's not in court. And I'm biased and partial, and I live inside of this issue, so it means, there's a way to get the conversation going around the state's perceived right to claim international jurisdiction over the press. That if it's like if you went and visited France, and you jaywalked, and then you went back home and you jaywalked, and France said, well, because it's illegal here and you did it there, we now have the right to extradite you, bring you back, and charge you. Like, France cannot claim international jurisdiction over its own laws. That's a massive libertarian concept right there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest reasons I care about this case so much is I think what he and Greenwald and a bunch of other people did over that period. Greenwald shedding light on it, and including Snowden. Like, I think all of these people are absolutely heroic in how they behaved, and it should be lionized as you've described. It's unfortunate because I think we're all just victim to the information overload that exists on the day-to-day news cycle and things like that. And also I think it's a matter of being blackpilled and just feeling like it's hopeless. And there's so many atrocities that happen fucking every 2 weeks. It seems like I have enough to fill a show. So I think that's the problem, but I will absolutely double down and make sure that I make this a bigger focal point moving forward, because I agree with you that it's tremendously important. I think the only reason that I wanted to have this conversation with Sal is that I disagree with all three on the panel that this case was purely a distraction. But I think we've talked about this enough, and everyone kind of sees my perspective that ultimately, if he were to spend the rest of his life in prison, it would have been catastrophic for self-defense protection in this country. And that's the reason that I made it a priority to talk about, because it was something that I felt like I could apply in my little way some pressure to counterbalance the media narrative about him. But he's freed, and I don't plan to make him, my focal point moving forward. I'm just grateful that the justice system got it right for once, and I'm also grateful that they got it right on Arbery. And I think that these are hopeful signs that perhaps the culture is shifting back towards more of a liberty-minded belief system. But I'm too pessimistic to believe that long term. I just hope that we can keep this ball rolling in a positive direction.
I would say quickly too that what you're going to see is the clash of the woke DA and the woke prosecutor versus what I think the GOP probably did right more than the Democrats ever did in terms of taking over at the local political level, where they seeded the judiciary for like 30 years. And that's so you at least in 2A cases, you're probably going to wind up with, and I believe the justice system is broken, bent, and every judge is crooked as a dog's hind leg. I do 100%. You're not going to find me like arguing in favor of these motherfuckers, but sometimes they get it into their own head that the bullshit that they're saying is real. And that's where you get decent courtroom decisions. Is when the puppet in the seat forgets that he's got strings and can actually, do something that shakes out the right way.
And I would recommend to anybody that wants to pivot old news into new news to use the Project Veritas investigation to bring up Assange as much as possible, because ultimately this is all a product, in my opinion, of continued prosecution of investigative reporters.
I don't mean to cut you off, but thank you. I go nuts every time I see somebody mentioned you. I meant to fucking have, like 2-3 weeks ago, Tim Pool went viral over this impassioned speech about James O'Keefe, and I just wanted to fucking choke him because, my God, dude, you had the opportunity to tie this to a decade-long war on journalism, but both Project Veritas and Tim Pool are making it sound like this is the first time the U.S. has ever gone after a journalist or publisher, and it's because, like, PV is rooted in partisan hackery, rooted in it. Like, that was their bread and butter. What they're doing now is different, and I acknowledge that. I do. But the reason that people feel some kind of way about Project Veritas and James O'Keefe is because of that history of partisan hackery. And if you were to make the case that, there is a very straight, very short line between Julian Assange and James O'Keefe and every other targeted journalist around the fucking world, you would be able to deliver that message to way more people, because when Tim Pool talks about James O'Keefe like that, it sounds like he's sucking his dick. It doesn't sound like he's there to defend journalism. It sounds like he's trying to get dinner. And like, that's not cool.
I disagree on that last part. I thought that it was a genuinely impassioned speech, that it seemed as if he understood the gravity of the prosecution. Maybe that's just my personal viewpoint on it, but regardless, I think that it's important that we stand up in real time to real persecutions of journalists, and if you can tie that into past egregious behavior that is persistent this day. I mean, my personal opinion is that they are torturing Julian Assange to death in real time. I think it's unbelievable that particularly the media is completely willing to allow this to happen. And it's like, you guys all have your heads on the chopping block. All of you. If any of you step out of line, this could be you. And I think that the sad reality is that none of them intend to step out of line. They plan to continue to push corporate narratives, and they know that they'll be safe as long as they do that. But as long as Assange is being, slowly murdered, it's going to be harder and harder to get anybody to tell the truth. And I think that's why it's so important.
And this is one of the strengths, though, I think, about non-compliant, civilly disobedient strategies. And this is one of the points I tried to make in my book, Anti-Politics, shameless plug, was that, the strength of civil disobedience lies in forcing the state to expose its brutality to the masses. And I think that Assange, and all the other ones we've mentioned for that matter as well, have done a really good job at doing that, right? Everyone sees now, like, what bastards they actually are. Like, I think it becomes pretty apparent to the average person that they're living in a tyrannical society when the crime for exposing war crimes, the penalty for exposing war crimes is more severe than actually committing them. So I think that like a lot of these martyrs, the Ross Ulbrichts of the world, the Cody Wilsons, the Julian Assange, these people do just as much in their suffering to wake people up as they do in their innovation.
Sad but true. I mean, yeah. I agree with you. It's this is what I've talked about a few times, and I got into a lot of trouble for it by using the term martyrdom. But that's essentially what's happening to Assange right now. Is the the more egregious he's treated, the more people I think that are sympathetic.
And that's
to
what
his
happens.
cause,
That's what happened to Martin Luther King. That's what happened to Gandhi. That's what happened to countless figures throughout history. They've used this strategy to sort of expose the statists. And I think that it's an effective strategy. And the more they continue down that path, the closer we get to a point where everybody sort of opens their eyes and says, what's going on here? Why is Ross Ulbricht serving double life plus 40? Why is Julian Assange being persecuted for this? Why are they making up sex crimes against Cody Wilson? What is going on here? How come Satoshi Nakamoto had to go into hiding? Like, these are questions that the average person has to face, right? They can't avoid them. And I think that that's going to become increasingly the case.
Yeah. Speaking of, I have Lynn Ulbricht on my show tomorrow, so everyone check that out. Liberty Lockdown on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else. But I agree with you. I mean, these are real-time, real-life martyrdoms that are happening right in front of our eyes. It's just, I think what kills me is there's so much of it, and we still struggle to wake people up. It's like, good God, could it be any more obvious what we're up against and what these fights are about? But it's stunning. I don't know when the tipping point is when people will ultimately realize, like, we have 50 different atrocities that are happening simultaneously. Can you wake up yet, please?
Yeah, but see, like, the thing is this, and this is where I think it gets interesting, is that as an agorist, it's like we solve that frustration that people feel about failing to wake people up. Agorism solves that, because what we're saying is, fuck it. Stop trying to educate everybody. Stop trying to wake people up. Who cares, right? We only get 80 years with a whole lot of luck. We only have 80 years on this planet. Why spend that trying to convince somebody else to be free? If you can't see that you're being oppressed, I don't know what to tell you at this point, right? As the government lines you up for forced injections, I don't know what to tell you. I can only focus on creating a free life for me, and like the way I've done that is to try to help people understand and explain how they can also do that by using counter economics and agorism. Well,
consider me unwilling to give up my Sisyphean struggle. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but you know, I think because I got to witness so many millions of young people get woken up by the Ron Paul movement. Even though I had been woken up prior, it was the first time I felt as if I had a community, and now I feel as if I have a real significantly sized community because of that moment, and I'm trying to give that to more people. But I agree with you, in your own life, it's really important not to allow this struggle to defeat your will, to defeat your passion, and to continue to grind to become financially free in the meantime is really key.
True, and I think it is definitely like a noble goal to try to educate people and to bring them to these ideas and stuff like that. But I would caution those people that you are going to experience a whole lot of frustration, Yes. The closer that you work with political institutions, the more frustration you're going to feel.
I could not agree more. I mean, every day I question my decision to support the LP via the Mises Caucus. I mean, it's very, very frustrating. But ultimately, I just haven't given up yet. But even if I give up, I'm still going to continue to do things on my own terms. It's just like, man, it is unbelievable that even the people that I see the world, 90% the same with, can still be pushing and pulling in 1,000 different directions that I think are completely worthless. But this is what started this conversation. You felt the same way. That's why we were talking about Rittenhouse. So.
It's ridiculous how I think libertarians like bicker over such like fine points when, like, let's be honest, like we see like all these people fighting on social media, but all these libertarians have more in common with each other than they, like, politically at least, they have more in common with each other than they do with their own parents. So it's like at the end of the day, like, what's the bickering about? Yeah, right, exactly.
This is the thing that I never understood about the Libertarian Party, Black Lives Matter, Rittenhouse, all of it. And ultimately one of the things that like tanked Joe Jorgensen was her coming out, her statement about BLM. The reason Black Lives Matter existed in 2014 was because the United States of America has a police state, a militarized, violent police state. That is something that the LP stands by. That is something that Black Lives Matter stands by. It got so lost in the mix from that now we've got to walk almost a decade back in history and go, remember how the cops suck? The cops still suck.
That's not an
and
accident.
that's the problem.
That's on purpose, though.
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee or Minneapolis, that precinct wouldn't have been burning. Would, kick it, fucking George Floyd probably wouldn't have happened, at least as a media sensation, the way that it happened. Like the police state at the root of it is the problem. And that's something that the LP needs to communicate effectively. That's something that BLM needed to communicate effectively. Now they've got $80 billion of Soros money, so it doesn't fucking matter. But that's not changing the problem on the ground, which is we live in a fucking police state.
Well, that's exactly it. And dude, you hit the nail on the head with that one. I remember back in 2015, 2016, when I was still living up north, and they strangled Eric Gardner on a sidewalk for not paying a 5-cent cigarette tax. We marched, myself and other anarchists, we marched from Washington Square Park to Madison Square Garden. We shut down it was like 9th Avenue or something like that. It was like the only time it's ever been shut down. And I remember thinking to myself, like you could see that they were sort of shifting the narrative from police accountability to Marxism. And I remember in the march, you could sort of see some sort of people who didn't really fit in, who were promoting these weird ideologies and stuff like that. They were trying to co-opt the narrative, and that's exactly what they do. Every time that some sort of libertarian movement takes off, it's not just with Black Lives Matter. It's the Tea Party. It's with all of these different sort of burgeoning libertarian moments. They sort of get co-opted by the state, and it's not an accident. It's on purpose. It's the same thing with the protests with George Floyd, how they were turned into riots by the state. They don't want us. The biggest fear for the state is a united citizenry in opposition to them.
And that's actually one of my main worries with the current anti-mandate movement happening right now. It does give me hope to see Black Lives Matter in New York marching along with the anti-mandate protesters there. But then there's also so much right-wing opportunism, how you kind of saw a lot of opportunism coming from the Democratic Party with regards to Black Lives Matter. I see the same thing happening again with the anti-mandate movement, and there are so many people trying to make it a left-right issue when in reality it's not. I'm seeing people lionize anyone who stands against mandates.
That's just
Ron DeSantis, literally. Ron DeSantis, whose head is so far up Israel's ass, he found Dan Crenshaw. He goes into a play spat with Joe Biden, and now suddenly he's on our side, or anyone else, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all these people, they're still politicians. It's still theater. I don't want to run the risk of legitimizing that system just because they are allowed their one issue that they're allowed to be good on, if that makes sense.
That's the inherent danger of political participation. That's why it's best to just remove yourself and just maintain the pure anarchist line, no matter what. Always maintain that consistent anarchist position. Bob Higgs said it best. I'll master the quote, but he said something I forget, but the point that he was trying to make was that it's sort of absurd to sort of try to say, well, yes, it's okay to say yes, this person is preferable to this guy, but as an anarchist, we should support neither because we don't believe in initiatory coercion. And I think that's really the main line that we should be focusing on.
Well, I think the problem that she was pointing out with, the right wing co-opting the anti-mandate movement, that's the same exact concern that the right-leaning libertarians had with advocating on behalf of Black Lives Matter, is that we view it as basically the one issue that they're good on is the ending police violence and trying to get rid of the monopoly on violence. But it's not that simple. I mean, ultimately, many people in Black Lives Matter were pushing for an increased state. They wanted more welfare, more taxes, more, and it's that's not what we believe in. So it's tough. It's tough. If you're gonna march with these people, you just have to acknowledge and accept the fact that you are marching on that one issue, and all of our differences have to be set aside.
Yeah.
But that was
Sure.
co-opted though, the same way that the Tea Party was co-opted, right? It was never supposed to be about Marxism or social justice or any of that bullshit. It was just strictly about police accountability. The same way that the Tea Party was about limited government, and then it became about right-wing nationalism and populism.
Is that true with Black Lives Matter though? Because I thought that the actual organization began with the Marxist leaning.
I don't know how they began. I know
Quickly. Just quickly, because there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, and I don't know. We got about 35 minutes left on the radio. I don't care how long the show goes. I don't know how much time you guys have, but I wanna be able to have the rest of the conversation in a way that won't get us thrown off of YouTube. So I'm going to drop the Rockfin link into the chat here, and we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to YouTube. If you've been watching us over there, thank you. I appreciate it. Hobbs, I appreciate the super chat. Hamza, you rock. And please continue to watch us on platforms that encourage free speech and critical thinking and don't punish us for that like YouTube does. And yeah,
That post on Rockfin.
We will see you over on the Rockfin right about now.